In this video, we're going to be making an HTML form from scratch. So the first thing we want to do is save the file as an HTML file. I've saved mine as newtutor.html, and the reason I've called it that is that we're going to be writing a document, a website, that will allow a tutoring center manager to gather or submit information about a new tutor who will be working in the tutoring center. The idea would be to then submit this information to a database so that it's stored and can be used in the maintenance of the tutoring center and all the reports and everything that go with it. But for right now, we're just going to write the HTML piece. We're just going to write the form that would display on the screen. So I'll make a header with a title that says Tutoring Center, add new tutor. And in the body of my document, I want to put the form that will allow me to enter this information. HTML forms start with the form tag and end with the form tag. The information that we'd like to collect is first name, last name, phone number, email address, hourly wage, and class year. If we make the assumption that the tutor is also a student, they would be a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. Now, for our first name, we would want to be able to have a text box. That's an input field of type text, and the name I will give to this field is first name. I'll need a text box to input the last name as well, and I'll call that text box last name. Now, there's a special new input type in HTML5 that allows for telephone numbers. So I could use the input type of tel, T-E-L, and the name I would give for that is maybe tutor phone. There's also an email input type, so I could do input type email, and the name might be tutor email. The wage will need to be a number, but I don't want to guarantee that it's an integer, so I don't want to use the number input type. I think that it will be easier on us if we just allow this to be any text, and then we verify that it's a valid wage in the form that would, or in the script that would process this form. So I'll call this the wage. And then our class year, we know the options. We're only going to have freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or other. So I could create this as a drop-down box. A drop-down uses the select tag, and we could call this class year. Each option within my drop-down box is wrapped in an option tag. So my first option, which would be freshman, might look like this. My second option for sophomore might use SO as my abbreviation, but I'll show the full word sophomore in the actual drop-down box. And for a junior, I might use the shortcut JR, but then type out junior to see on the screen. And senior, maybe SR. And in case this person isn't a student or doesn't identify as one of these four, we might also allow the option of other. So this will create a drop-down box that will display four options: the word freshman, the word sophomore, the word junior, the word senior, and the word other. But when they are stored within the form, it'll be as FR, SO, JR, SR, or other. Now, I want to maybe pretty this up a little bit. We will come back to do that after we just verify that everything is working correctly. So I've created a form that will allow me to type text in for first name, text in for last name, a telephone number in for phone number, an email address in for email, and it will allow any text to go in for wage. If I want to maybe restrict the total number of characters I'm allowed to type here, or I'm allowing the users to type, I might type max length is, let's see, wages might be 2 decimal places, $2 places, and a decimal point, so maybe I will allow a maximum of 5 characters to be typed in here. This form should work. It probably won't be very pretty yet, but it should be functional. So if I save the HTML file, and then, so here is what our form looks like the way we've typed it right now. Since I didn't put any line breaks or paragraph breaks or anything in, it's just going on one long line. So one option might be to put line breaks at the end of every question, copying and pasting, save it, and refresh, and now everything's on a separate line. This still isn't extremely pretty. I could line up all of my inputs by putting this into an HTML table. So I could wrap everything in the table tag, and then each row will start with the question, and then we could make a second table cell in each row for the specific form inputs. So my second cell in the first row will be this text box. And so on down the line. Then I would end, instead of putting in a line break, I can end the second cell and end the row. That will give me a new line instead of a line break. And if I save this version and refresh, now my boxes for my form are all lined up, and that's because I've put it in the format of a table. So all of the questions are appearing in the first column, and all of the form inputs are appearing in the second column. Now, one thing you might notice is missing is a submit button, and the input type for a submit button is, unsurprisingly, input with a type of submit. And the value that I give it will be what shows up on the button. So maybe I'll say click here to submit. And if I save and refresh, now my button shows up with a click here to submit written on it, just as I typed here. Whatever I type is what shows up on the button. Now if I want maybe a little extra space, I could put an extra line break in there. And there we go. That's not too bad. Still not a beautiful form, but it is a lot better than what we started with, a single line of text boxes. The biggest piece here is going to be what happens when I click submit. Right now, nothing happens. If I click submit, it will just put essentially the information that I filled in the top. And that's very insecure and not what we want. We want to be able to store this information and then use it within a script. So where that comes into play is the form tag. And so what we need to do is identify a method for my form, and you get two options. There's post and there's get. Get is essentially a generalization of this. You would be able to get things from the address bar. That's very insecure, and post is a much better option, especially when we're going to try to process with PHP. And the way that we tell it which PHP script will be processing this form is with the option or the attribute of action. So if I created a new document called newtutor.php instead of .html, when I click the submit button, this form will load newtutor.php. So the action is what happens next after I click submit. This is how we identify what happens to the form after we click submit. There's still work to be done there. But we have created a table that makes our form look a little nicer, and our form will collect information in a text box for first and last name. It will collect a telephone number, an email address, a wage, and a class year. So this is not a functional form, but it is a complete form, and we'll talk about how to process it in another video.